Last week, I answered a bunch of questions about my experience playing City Skylines 2. I promise I'm done milking this whole I've played City Skylines 2 thing after this video, but I saw this shot from the city services video of my city and was just way too inspired to talk about it and maybe get a bit more rambly than I did before. Plus, I'm sure there's a couple more questions I can answer, right? Let's do an easy question first. JRR6947 has asked recently about how the game feels with a city's population at around 150,000, considering this is roughly around where the original cities would really start to chug. It's important to know that I really don't know how close the version I'm playing on is to the one that will be released, if not the same one, and if it will be different, how different will it be? That said, I happen to have a city with a population of 153,000 handy, as well as Rectanglo at 45,000, so I booted them both up one after another, put them at speed 3, and just flew around clicking on things. I don't know, they felt pretty similar, I guess. I feel weird even answering this because it feels so irrelevant to the final product that will be released, but yeah, in the first Cities game, I was able to tell when a game was on speed 3 and the cars were just going the same speed they would at speed 1, and this half-baked test I just didn't feel like that. So I'd be willing to bet there's plenty of improvement there. This question can service as a segue into something I wanted to talk about with Rectanglo and Cities 2 though. A lot of our first introduction to City Skylines 2 was seeing images and footage of $2.20's city New Dollarton, and obviously it's beautiful. He did a bang up job of getting all that high density, the tall buildings, the standout looking buildings onto those islands and piecing them together to service the flyover video and the screenshots really well. But what I personally discovered with Rectanglo was sprawl. I recognize the socio and environmental benefits of vertical building, don't get me wrong, I get it, let's do it, it's great, but as a small town kid and from a purely selfish I like the way this looks viewpoint, having so much low density sprawl is just so much fun in this game, and the way the residential densities demands are balanced in CS2 feels pretty realistic, if not even a bit challenging. In CS1, it felt like low and high density demand would both just steadily generate without too much specific input from you other than you making sure that commercial and industry demands were satisfied. In CS2, it feels like you have to actually think about what the people who are in the different density of housing would want, then provide specifically that if you want that demand to generate. So following that theory along, because I've played mostly with habits from CS1 and not really understanding the intricacies of how demand works in CS2, I've ended up being able to just zone low density and have it go on for what feels like miles and miles and miles and get that small town vibe that feels so familiar to me. But then I do get this high density demand and I'm like, oh, how does that work? Where do I put that? And I slowly get to learn about how to accommodate loads of people living in a small area because that's so foreign to me. And in the first cities, high density does exist, sure, but the number of people in the buildings felt low and it wasn't really much different accommodating them versus accommodating the low density. I don't know where I'm really going with this. I guess I'm saying the game hasn't even been released yet, and I am already learning new experiences from it that can directly relate me to the real world. I think that's something special. Okay, let's move on to another question from Mr. Meowpuss, who is asking about comparing SimCity 2013 to this City Skylines sequel. Oh boy, have I ever played SimCity 2013. Okay, I honestly don't know if I have. The SimCity naming conventions always confused the heck out of me, but on this channel, you can find me playing SimCity 2000, SimCity 3000, and SimCity 4, which I guess none of them are SimCity 2013. But anyways, City Skylines was my first ever city builder, so I went back and tried some of the old SimCity games and failed miserably. Looking back at that experience now, I wonder if part of my failing miserably with them is because coming from the perspective of only knowing CS1, I had a really poor handle on what city management really meant. I'm learning now just how little management there is in City Skylines if you think of what else is possible, and as we dive more and more into these developer diaries and I get to compare them to what actually playing the sequel is like, yeah, it absolutely delivers more management aspects. In Cities 2, you can do so much tinkering. You can proactively set things up and fight the budget on it, or you can reactively place or upgrade things and fight with the impact of it all. You can affect the budgets so specifically specifically to target XYZ chain of management mechanics, or try your hardest to just even Stevens everything and satisfy everyone, but good luck with that. Yeah, there's way more actual management and mechanics, and I think these developer diaries really make that clear, even without us YouTubers trying to stay within an NDA while talking about it. I think I can say with confidence that management genre gamers will enjoy what City Skylines 2 brings to the table over its predecessor. Now, I want to ask a question to the audience in response to this. There are a couple people in my community who have mentioned they're a little nervous about this and that they may not be able to find much joy in CS2 if they have to fight with the management part of it in order to be able to just paint a fun city like you essentially can in CS1. My first few dozen hours playing CS2, I was definitely doing the bare minimum management-wise, and I think you could kind of scrape by without too much skill or deep thinking or what have you, but I do think there's at least a small step up in the minimum of game mechanics you'll have to use to be able to grow a city to Megalopolopolis. What do you guys think, or what's your response here? Are there folks out there who, depending on the severity of the difficulty curve, might be deterred from playing CS2 because of it? Let me know in the comments. I'm genuinely curious on this one because my perspective is so heavily focused on wanting more difficulty and management mechanics. Okay, next rambling topic comes from Squib2118, who is asking about city scaling and size. Q Biffa.
Yeah, I haven't yet sort of gone, oh, I wish the map was bigger, or I wish I could, have more space, or, I've not felt that at all because there's so much to do in the game.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I know I haven't been playing it too long, but so far, at least, I've never found myself thinking that there's not enough map size in Cities 2. Anytime that I have wanted to expand my city limits, I've had plenty of tiles available to purchase to do so. I know folks have done their hypothesizing and compared map size overlays with CS1 and real cities and CS2 and all this science stuff, and some folks are comparing the new CS2 map size with CS1 with 25 tiles. I mean this truly. I have no idea how these two area sizes actually compare, but I can say with confidence, CS2 feels huge. One thing I haven't seen mentioned is the difference in high density between the two games, and I'm starting to think that's a pretty big contributor to how big these maps feel. In the first game, you still had to lay out kind of swaths of high density zoning to put a dent in your demand. In City Skylines 2, the demand feels so much more balanced, and no longer are you zoning block after block after block of high density residential, so you're using less space in that sense, leaving more map available for more goodies, making it feel larger. And I mean, map size aside, gang, you know how you lose hours to City Skylines already? It's only going to get better, or worse, I guess, depending on how you think of it, in City Skylines 2. There's just so many info views to open and poke around, so many different ways you can try to balance your money and tinker with spending, different things you can try to make demand happen, upgrades to read about, just lots. Trying to look at this objectively, I do think that feeling will lessen over time as we get more comfortable with the game, don't have to spend so long reading tooltips, and gain some muscle memory. But for now, I'm happy to ride this wave of just getting lost in the sea of information available to us. Now, Terrell Rogers 7645 has been hanging out in my comments for a good while, and I want to address their question about sandbox difficulty and car accidents. So far, the most difficult part of the game for me personally has all formed around managing money. I find myself wanting to provide every area with an abundance of services and goodies, which promptly puts me into debt, and then I have to rework things. Obviously, unlimited money will remove that particular challenge, and unlock all removes any planning you may have to do in order to, well, unlock all the things. I'm stating the obvious here. It's sandbox mode. I honestly haven't tried sandbox mode yet, so take this with a grain of salt, but I think there will still be a small challenge in managing demand, because demand now feels more dependent on what you provide the area rather than in CS1, where it felt like it just kind of grew over time easily. Mind you, with unlimited money, I imagine you can manipulate taxes and budgets to really be able to make anything happen. Overall, Sandbox is Sandbox, and I think if if your goal is to just paint a city, you'll be totally able to do that without any problem. And don't stress too much about car accidents. I've seen a few. They're honestly a bit fun to spot because it gives that feeling of, oh, this city is alive. But then you either watch it until it gets cleaned up, or you just scooch away and carry on with your building. Unless you're like those people I saw on Reddit who are planning on making accidents happen as often as possible, trying to cause as much mayhem as possible and explosions and disorder, then, well, you carry on. The last comment from the previous Q&A video I'll touch on is this one about how they never heard I was taking questions on CS2. What a great reminder to subscribe to the channel for everything City Skylines 2 and watch videos as they pop up. Like this one here, that is the start of a modded City Skylines series set in the Star Wars universe. Be kind to each other out there.